I'm with Kay Wilson, a British-born tour guide. Now, 9 years ago, something very dramatic happened to you. Kay, can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yes, I'm a tour guide, and I was guiding an American Christian friend. I myself, as you've rightly said, British, Israeli, Jewish. And we were on the Israel National Trail on a Shabbat, a beautiful day, and we were pounced on by two Palestinian terrorists, held at knife point for 30 minutes. They found my Israeli ID card, which had the word Jew written on it. And they tied our hands with our shoelaces, gagged us, took off my Star of David necklace, and they started to butcher. And they were with machetes. So I fell on the ground. They were stabbing me in the back and the side. And the only thing I knew to do was to play dead. So I kept my eyes open, and I watched in front of me my friend hacked to death like a cucumber in front of my eyes. They leave, they come back to make sure I'm dead. They turn me over and they stab me in the chest, and that missed my heart by 4 millimeters. I have one last commission in life, which is to actually get up and die nearer where I parked the car so the police could find my body. And I managed to stand. I turn my back on what's left of my friend, and I just begin to walk. And step by step, I can see bones coming out of my side. I've thrown up behind the gag. It's like breathing through a straw. And in order not to think about my friend Christine, I'm a musician, a jazz pianist, and I started to compose this arrangement of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, not to think of her. And by doing this, I managed to walk over a mile, gag-bound barefoot, until I reached help. And I had 13 machete wounds in my lungs and diaphragm, over 30 broken bones, crushed sternum, broken shoulder blade, dislocated shoulder, rushed to hospital. And it comes about a little while later that when they pounced on us, I managed to stab one with my penknife very lightly. And that stab, the DNA, his blood on my sleeve, enabled the police to apprehend the murderers only after 2 days. And they confessed the murder in another Israeli woman 10 months before, a lady called Netta Sorek. And 9 months after the murder, I was in court. They were both sentenced. And I think, Paul, one of the most shocking things for me is that when the judge asked them, but why did you murder an American Christian? They just shrugged their shoulders and they smirked and they said, oh, we thought she was Jewish. So that's my story.
Wow. How did you manage to survive something like this? Would you call it a miracle?
I can be thankful. Obviously, it defied the doctors. They thought it was pretty amazing that I survived, let alone walked over a mile with my injuries. But I don't want to apply some kind of messianic greatness to my own survival because somebody died. You know what? Does that make God capricious? Does he favor me? Has he got a miracle only for me and not a miracle for Christine? So I just like to take the approach that I can be thankful that I've been awarded more time to do what I need to do.
How close to death actually were you?
About as close as I am to this fat, furry-headed microphone near my mouth, about 2 inches. I was nearly dead when I got to hospital.
Of course, you lost your friend Christine. Tell us a little bit about her.
I didn't know Christine too well. I'd met her on a tour where I was actually guiding in Poland. I wanted to guide historical tours of the Holocaust for Christians. And Christine was part of a group, and she struck me when we were at a certain death camp of the Nazis. And she wasn't on the bus, you know, and as the rookie guide, I went back through this death camp, and I found her leaning against this memorial. And she was reciting the Kaddish. The Kaddish is a prayer that Jewish people say, like death is not mentioned, but God's name is praised. And I said, look, you should be on the bus. What are you doing? And she says, I'm reciting Kaddish for your people. And that was just so striking for me. I invited her to come to Israel for a long weekend, and she arrived on the Friday and was murdered on the Sabbath.
So who were your assailants? Were they part of a political organisation?
It's a bit blurry. One said he was from Fatah, the PLO. Another guy affiliated with Hamas. Political, yes. Religious, yes, because they wanted to kill Jews in the name of religion.
And is that the end of the story as far as them two are concerned?
I don't know. I mean, I'm doing everything I can to ensure that these people never get out of prison, not in a prisoner exchange, and I'm trying to work on it because I know you've done interviews with other people, but most astonishingly, is that countries like Great Britain give a lot of foreign aid to the Palestinian Authority, and in turn the Palestinian Authority rewards murderers with a monthly salary. So at the moment, our assailants are getting, I don't know in British pounds, but around $3,200 a month each. So is it the end of the story? It's not the end of the story for me until they stop the salaries, and it's not the end of the story for me until I make sure that they never will get out.
So let me get this right. They have been and they've murdered your friend, and they've stabbed you so many times. They've been arrested, put into prison, and the Palestinian Authority are paying them?
Yes, the Palestinian Authority works on a two-forked system. And I know this because I have many Palestinian friends and I've been in these areas. The two-forked system is this. One is incitement. You know, their curriculums, their camp songs, their literature, TV, it's all filled with, and I say it not lightly, it's all filled with like a Nazi propaganda, like murder the Jews, kill the Jews are pigs and monkeys. So there's an incitement. So as I see it, there's two forks to what happens. And I've been to the Palestinian Authority. I have friends, not the authority, the areas under their auspices. I have friends there. And it works like this, all right? How can people in the 21st century reward cold-blooded savages? And one is, Palestinian society is rife with incitement against Jewish people. It's in their curriculums, it's in their songs, their medias, their television, about how Jews are unworthy of life, Jews are pigs and monkeys. So if you grow up in that kind of atmosphere, you're going to believe that this is what Jewish people are. And the second thing is, let's not forget that the Palestinian Authority in foreign aid have received $70 billion. That's a lot of money, all right? $70 billion. And when I go to these areas, I look and I think, I mean, some areas are horrible and some are very nice. But I think, where are all your museums, your libraries, your clinics, your new buildings? They could have built a state. But instead of spending money responsibly to better their own people, what they do is they set aside 8% of foreign aid from the British government and the likes, and they reward these murderers. So you've got incitement and incentive, financial incentive, and that's how innocent people get murdered.
Mm-hmm. How long was your recovery?
It's still recovery. I see it as a lifelong road to recovery, psychologically. Physically, I think I was up and around, but I would imagine about 3 years until I started feeling I could get up without too much pain. And psychologically, it's, I've come to terms with it. It's something you live with. I've done very extensive trauma therapy. I think I'm gleaning good things that I can learn about myself, about life, but I don't think it's I was in a murder and everything's okay, because it's not okay. No. So it's an ongoing thing.
You still struggle with the trauma of it?
I don't have like flashbacks or anything. I did trauma therapy at Hadassah Hospital, and it was amazing, very helpful. But I struggle with PTSD. Like, I don't like noise. I don't like a sudden noise or too many crowds, or I can't. I mean, I used to be a tour guide, but I can't now because I have low emotional, mental energy. It's hard for me to take a tour group for 10 days. So things change. Yeah. So it's that kind of less emotional, mental focus.
Now, you've written a book called The Rage Less Travelled. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I decided, it started off in trauma therapy. One of my methods of therapy, because how was I traumatized? I'm not like a hysterical person where, fall apart. But the trauma expressed itself in me. I was completely numb. Almost, it was a disassociation from what's going on around. And part of my therapy was to write an account of what happened. And I did this, and then the therapist says to me, she says, look, this is a very, very accurate account. In fact, it was used as corroboration from the police in the court. And she said, now what I want you to do, we're going to take your 5 senses, and the first couple of weeks, 3 weeks, you're going to revisit every sentence, and you're going to start with what you saw. What were the colours? What were the textures? What was the movement? And then when I'd done that, I had to go back to the same text, take apart every sentence and write, what did I hear? I heard the birds, I heard the crickets. Did Christine whimper or shriek or cry? Did they grunt or did they moan or did they bark or growl? I did that with all the senses, and by doing that, it put together a very, very visceral account of what happened. And that was 20 pages. And I used to give that out to people, and they said to me, you should write a book. And I was journaling anyway. And so I spent the next 7 years writing actually what turned out to be a very short memoir. It's all written in the present tense. It's not like hindsight. You know, it's not like my pearls of wisdom. It's what it is like to be in my head. What is it like to actually survive such a brutal murder? And I wanted the world to know that an innocent woman was hacked to death because they believed her to be Jewish. And I also thought, you know, for other people who've had trauma and PTSD, maybe something can be helpful. And the other thing I wrote it because if you haven't been to Israel and you only feed off the media, you're going to think that this is a war zone and like, you know, the Zionist occupiers or there's a goodie and there's a baddie, all right? And Israel is a very, very complex society. And there's a lot of clumsiness and good-heartedness. It's brash. But I wanted people to see the normalcy of Israel, the everyday, the funny side of things too. So I called it The Rage Less Travelled because I think rage is a very important aspect of dealing with this kind of thing. It's my right to rage. I was violated in a terrible way. And by owning and limiting my right to rage, that's what's helping me become more healthy. I must tell you one more thing about the book, Paul. I worked with a book agent, and I worked very hard at writing. You know, I'm no genius. And after just really strolling through mud for years, I came up with a very, very good book, which I was pleased with. So the agent, top agent in the world, sent it to all these big New York publishers. And I was thrilled. I was complimented because they say, you know, this is so well written. We were there. It's written in the present tense. And what an out-of-the-park story. How many people have survived something like this? But with that, one of the publishers said, because Wilson, that's me, because Wilson does not mention the suffering of the impoverished Palestinians, we will not be publishing her book. And I think that is outrageous, because this is a memoir. This is something that happened to me, and memoirs, by their very name, is the author's story. I'm not writing a history book. So in the end, I self-published. I did an Audible version where I read it, and I just want people to read it.
And many people commented on your book as well?
Yes, I got some amazing reviews, which I was very, very happy about. A journalist from the Sunday Telegraph, Julie Burchill, I think she called it indelible, mesmerizing, monumental debut. So these things are very, very meaningful for me. And also Colonel Richard Kemp, a wonderful man who used to be the commander of the infantry forces in Afghanistan. I've met him, personal friend. He wrote a review to the book, a very, very beautiful review.
So anyone who would like to get the book and hear your story, where can they get that book from?
You can go to Amazon, just type in The Rage Less Travelled. It's on Kindle, paperback or Audible.
Now, you have created the Yellow Brick Road. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, the Yellow Brick Road is a project, a voluntary project actually. It's a long story, but, you know, life is full of long stories. If I can just go back to the title of the book, okay, The Rage Less Travelled. It seems like these days the worst thing you can do is hate or rage. You know, mustn't do that. And there's a shutdown of freedom of speech with that, by the way, but that's a subject for another day. And I understood that we must rage at evil. There's a saying in the Talmud. It says, he who is kind to the cruel shall be cruel to the kind. So I understood I need moral clarity. That people who murder people and have no remorse, that we should do everything we can to seek justice and relate to them for who they are, all right? I also understood that by hating evil, I have no right to hate innocent people, okay? I don't. And by making that moral separation, a lot of Arabs, a lot of Palestinians reached out to me. In fact, I hid, at the risk of my own life, by the way, I hid 2 Arab young men in my house, Muslim men, from other Muslims who wanted to murder them. So I became quite loved among some of the Arab community. And a couple of years ago, a Palestinian young man reached out to me. He lives in a refugee camp. And he said, Kay, thank you for not blaming us all. And we met. And I asked him what he wanted to do. And he says, I want to stay where I am and help these children not to indulge in perpetual victimhood. Because one thing that struck him about myself, he said, was, I don't want to be a victim. And so what we've done together, we've created this after-school club where we're teaching children English, because the moment they're taught English, their world opens up. They're not just learning about Islam and how bad the Jews are. And so we teach them English, we teach them music to soften their hearts. We teach them how to clear their trash up. We teach them what their own personal property is. We teach them to visit a neighbour if they're sick. We teach them moral and social responsibility. And so I called it the Yellow Brick Road because if you remember, I was composing this arrangement of Somewhere Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz. And I think we want to teach children emotional intelligence, which would be the scarecrow. We want to teach them to empathise for one another and hopefully later on for their neighbours, the Jewish people. And that would be the Tin Man. We want to give them a heart. And we want to empower them to think for themselves, so actually they would have the moral fortitude and courage to stand up against adults in their authority who would groom them and send them to the death. And that would, of course, be courage.
Wow.
And it's an amazing little grassroots project. And I've found many Palestinians who say to me, look, we want to be part of this. We want to be a social worker. We want to be the chef. We want to be... So, anybody who wants to take part in this great venture, it's not your regular NGO where there's, big salaries. All the money, without exception, goes to the people who need it to run the school.
Has everything that you've experienced helped to open doors to go and speak into other governments and other nations?
Yes, it has. I mean, absurdly so for somebody who just likes playing the piano, likes her wine, likes jazz music, likes taking the dogs out. I mean, I just found myself at the United Nations. That was good. I gave them a piece of my mind. You can see it on YouTube. They certainly do. Utterly useless organisation. But I've been also working with a very magnificent organisation, which I believe you've interviewed Itamar Marcus from Palestinian Media Watch. And it's a very thorough organisation that follows the incitement that really ends up with the death of also innocent children because they see themselves as martyrs. And so I've been to Holland, the Dutch government with Itamar. We've addressed members of parliament there. Holland have cut the funding to the Palestinian Authority. And we're working together. So it's a very slow political process, but I'm very hopeful that one by one these countries will stop it until they stop paying salaries to terrorists. Unfortunately, I have to say, Paul, the ones who are really sticky and the ones who've outright lied about it. Can I name and shame people in this interview? Oh, okay, great. So like Alistair Burt, yeah? Alistair Burt is a liar. He says that no British money goes to terrorists, and that's simply not true. So the people who refuse to stop the funding or help the Palestinian Authority give an account to where this money goes are the British government. And I'm hoping after Brexit, I hope it happens because obviously that was the referendum of the British people. I hope after Brexit that these people will get a grip. By the way, you know that Priti Patel actually suspended the funding 3 years ago. But then she met, apparently accordingly to the very, very liberal media, she did the great sin and met with Israelis. And so therefore she was forced to resign and then the funding went back up again. But I'm hoping with people like Priti Patel again that they will take steps to absolutely stop all funding until the Palestinian Authority changes its ways.
So even today you're saying that the British government is still funding the Palestinian Authority, which is funding terrorists?
Yes, and they know where the money goes. It's actually an organisation, it's a segment of the government called the Department for International Development, who've lied through their teeth.
How does that make you feel? You're someone who's been a victim of terrorism, and yet your own government is paying.
How does it make me feel? Okay, thank you for asking. Look, I still have family in England. I don't work in England. I don't pay British taxes. But my family are workers, and to think that their tax money is funding the very savage who tried to murder me, it's outrageous. I think it's a moral obscenity. It makes me very, very angry, and that's where I channel my rage. I don't go around like blaming innocent people. I direct it at the likes of the British government.
What's your hope for the future?
My hope for the future is that I will outlive this interview. Meaning, I don't want to be too, I don't like all these inspirational memes and stuff, but I do have a heightened awareness of the present. Meaning that this interview now is the best thing I've done in all my life, because I'm very aware that this might be all I have. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes. So I have kind of a short-sighted vision of the future. But the short-sighted would be, I'm grateful that I'm still alive to conclude the interview. The long-sighted future dream is that if I can help one Palestinian child by what I'm doing with my friends in that refugee camp, if we can save a child from being groomed and give him a better education and make him a better person, and we can save the lives of innocent people.
Wow. Okay, Kay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul.